Welcome in, everyone, to the Horned Frog Blitz podcast number 7, I believe. Got a lot to talk about this week. Got Kansas State game to recap. Got a Iowa State game on the road for the Frogs. I'm Jeremy Clark, joined always by my good friend Jeremiah Glenn. Jeremiah, how's things going for you?
It's going pretty good, man. Pretty good. Another exciting week of college football in the books.
You say you're doing pretty good, but I think you're doing pretty bad because Texas blew the lead and blew a two games to none lead, and then just let Toronto come back in the seventh inning.
You fellow Ranger fans, you feel our pain. I mean, it's tough to watch. These guys battled all year, and they weren't expected to do much. I'm just looking forward to next year when Yu Darvish is healthy, and we're going to have a good full pitching staff.
I wish you guys can see him right now. Just the pain in his eyes.
It's legit.
Well, there's a lot of – speaking of pain in the eyes, there was a lot of pain in the eyes of the Kansas State fans last Saturday as TCU somehow came back and won that game on the road, again in a tough environment. We're going to talk about that game. We're going to talk about Iowa State, talk a little recruiting with you guys, and, of course, go around the Big 12 and predict some games for this week. But let's dive into that Kansas State game first. We made the road trip, another interesting road trip for us both, and we got to the stadium. It was funny because we were listening to the Texas OU game on the way up to Manhattan, and it was funny that we're sitting there laughing that Texas is winning, and I looked over at you and I said, man, college football is just a weird sport. And what did I say when we pulled up to Manhattan, when we pulled into the parking lot and saw the ocean of purple all over the place, and I looked at you and I said, man, I don't feel good about this all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much parity in college football right now. I mean, you're seeing it more than ever before. There's not a dominant team this year. There's a bunch of good teams, and then there's a bunch of mediocre teams, but there's not a great team. There's not a great team out there, and so this national championship is up for grabs. But every week you better buckle your chin strap, because I don't care if it's Iowa State or if it's Oklahoma.
Exactly.
In this conference, you better be ready to play.
I don't think even the most diehard burnt orange Texas fan would have thought that they would have had a chance against Oklahoma. And you and I both have several friends that are Texas true and through, burnt orange, and we're even feeling bad about Bevo. I mean, literally upset about it. That we're saying there was no chance for Texas to beat OU, but that's kind of the feeling I got for TCU Kansas State. I was thinking all week, just Kansas State just doesn't have the talent to go man for man with the Frogs. Obviously, the talent was going to be better, the speed was going to be better on TCU's side of the ball, and man, I was proven wrong. I mean, again, Bill Snyder, just an excellent head coach. They play fundamentally sound football. They don't out-athlete you, but, man, they just get the job done. And there was a lot of folks up there at that game that just couldn't believe what they were seeing, especially in the first half, the way Kansas State was able to build that 18-point halftime lead. And, from the very beginning, you thought TCU had a great chance to go out there and score a lot of points. I mean, for crying out loud, they score in the very first play of the game, 86 yards when Aaron goes right up the middle. And pretty much after that, after it was 14-14, it was Kansas State's game the rest of the first half.
What Bill Snyder does, what Bill Snyder does with the talent that he has is incredible. I mean, it's what Gary Patterson did for so long. Obviously, Patterson's getting a higher caliber athlete now, but he recruits big offensive linemen, JUCO kids that come in and they're ready to play right off the bat, and they're always physical. They're always fundamentally sound, and you always know you're in for a tough game when you play Kansas State, especially in Manhattan, especially at night. That was an incredible atmosphere. It was 53,000. It sounded like 83,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very loud crowd. I still look at that game, though, and I think, okay, look at the second half. TCU outscored them 35-10. To me, that's more of what it was. I think the young guys had to come in and walk into that atmosphere and get themselves under control, and some of the seniors talked about how they walked around at halftime and talked to the offense and the defense and tried to calm the young guys down and said, just do your job. We're not asking you to do anything special. Just do your job. If you do your job, we're going to be okay. And that kind of confidence from guys like Trevon Boykin and Josh Doxson, it rubs off on the younger guys. And they have somebody to look up to. And you saw what happened in the second half, 35-10. They outscored them. But one of these games, they're going to have to quit getting in a pickle on the road early.
Yeah.
You have to put a team away, and they need to do it this week against Iowa State.
It's tough. I mean, when you go up and play Minnesota in front of the largest crowd in program history, then you go play at Texas Tech against the second largest crowd in the program's history. Then Kansas State is the third largest crowd they've ever had there. I mean, that's impressive for them to come out there and win. But, Coach Patterson said after the game that he doesn't think his team was ready in the first. They were, joking around, laughing it up. He doesn't think they were taking it very serious in the beginning of the game. Of course, when they scored 14 points, you were kind of thinking, well, maybe they did look like they were taking it serious. But obviously that was on offense. Defense, they were giving up some plays that traditionally they're pretty strong at defending. I've never seen a team just line up and maul TCU's run defense like Kansas State was able to do. And you're talking about a guy that was a walk-on quarterback that had over 100 yards rushing on him in the first half. That's not even 100% to go right now, but he looked like he was just able to do anything he wanted to. And, man, again, you just got to give credit to Kansas State. They're 3-2. They've lost 2 games by late in the game against Oklahoma State, and they lost late in the game against TCU. But that's a team that is very close to being undefeated right now. And every year, people don't give Kansas State a whole lot of credit, but somehow or another, they're always getting it done. That's going to be a scary game for when Baylor goes up there, and anytime people go up to Manhattan, it's going to be a tough game for them. But if TCU ever had a bullseye on their back, good grief, man, this is the year, because everyone is out there to get them. And I think it proves when you look at the attendance for these games and they come out and say, well, this is the top 3 largest crowd ever in our program's history. I mean, for crying out loud, Texas Tech, as many big games has been played in that stadium, for that to be the second largest crowd ever, that's saying something.
It is. And you can look at, I'm looking right now at the young team on defense. I think what's happening is other teams are looking at this, and they're not intimidated by TCU.
Right.
They think that they can play with TCU, and you get TCU on your home field. You got your crowd behind you. They think they can make some things happen. So they've lost a little bit of the swagger on the defensive side of the ball. One thing I noticed that I was really shocked to see. First of all, Kansas State's offensive line looked huge, and they were destroying TCU at the point of attack in the run game. Every run seemed like it was getting 5 yards there for a while, and even the zone reads are really slow developing plays, or where he would just pause and look for an opening. Wilson was getting eaten up by the linemen. So the smaller linebackers were getting swallowed up, and Kansas was just more physical at the point of attack. Obviously, TCU corrected that, thankfully, in time. They came out and played a much more sound second half.
They only gave up 110 yards in the second half.
And I think they got to Huebner and got in his head a little bit in the second half. And when you have an offense like you have, it's got to feel good to know they can bail you out of that situation. But you can't keep going down 38-17 at halftime or 35-17 at halftime and expect to pull a lot of those games out.
I will say this. Once I saw that Kansas State was throwing the ball a little bit more to begin the third quarter, I was not only shocked, but I was obviously optimistic that TCU would have a chance because they were stopping the clock, because Huebner's not the greatest passer in the world. And Kansas State doesn't have the greatest receivers in the world. They weren't going to go out there and create separation. Yeah, they did catch a couple big passes, but overall, the passing game, they only had 157 total yards, passing yards, and I think Huebner completed, 13 of 33 passes, something silly like that. But, the defense did wake up, but I do think, Kansas State going to the air a little bit more contributed to their success. I think if they would have ran the ball a whole lot, that we might have seen a different game. Obviously, on that 4th and 1, Coach Snyder's taking a lot of heat up in Manhattan for not going for that play, and it could have been. We could have been talking about TCU's first loss. A lot of what ifs in that game, but we're going to dive into some positives and some negatives. First, the positives. I think we all saw Trevon have his Heisman moment, have his Heisman game, because if there was ever an atmosphere, as you mentioned earlier, that atmosphere was just crazy. We're sitting there and just watching how much the crowd was into it. No offense against TCU fans, but I just don't know if I've ever seen a crowd get that much into a game. But for Trevon to go out there and perform the way he did, especially in the fourth quarter, because if you're looking for Heisman moments, he had them. I mean, he put the team on his back. Him and Josh really did. But Trevon, that 14-yard scamper on the touchdown was great. The 69-yard touchdown. I mean, he made the read. That play, come to find out, was really supposed to be designed for Aaron Green, and Trevon saw an opening and took it. And I think we all saw that he still has his wheels. I know some people were thinking that he might look a little bit slower from last year, but he did look fast in that run.
I do think he's worked his way into game shape. I still think he was a little slow to start the season off, but I really do think he's rounding into shape right now. And I think he's playing at the top of his game right now. And so you're seeing him, the ability to run and throw equally as impressive right now. And yeah, I mean, when you have an offense like that, man, it's something fun to watch. You don't want to take for granted what you're watching right now because you don't know. Even if Cumbie and Meacham are back next year, there's no guarantee that Kenny Hill or whoever else is running this offense is going to do the same things we're seeing.
Right.
So, as a fan, guys, sit back and enjoy what you're watching. I know it's hard.
That's what Coach P says.
You get caught up in this, style points, argument. Are we going to make the playoffs or not? Enjoy the caliber of football that you're watching right now. The defense isn't where you want it, but, man, this is an unreal offense that can score on anybody in the country. I don't care if you're Alabama. I don't care what defense you throw at TCU right now. They're going to score points on them.
Yeah.
And I really hope they get a shot to get to the playoffs and play an SEC team that's with one of their vaunted defenses and see how many points they can put up on them, kind of like they did Ole Miss last year.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, I don't want to look too far ahead.
Got to get past Iowa State first.
Iowa State. I'm really bad about that.
No, but, Coach P said that you got to sit back and just enjoy watching players like Trevon and Josh because you never know when the type of players they are going to be on your roster. And it's so funny to sit back and think, 2 years ago, everyone was writing Trevon off and, just ready to hand the starting position to Matt Jokel. And, man, what a difference 2 years makes. I don't think anyone would trade Trevon for any quarterback in the country right now. And I'm just so happy for him because he's worked hard. And, he's obviously a Heisman caliber quarterback. I think he's the top Heisman at the position, top Heisman caliber quarterback in the country. I don't think there's any question that he's when the ball's in his hands that he's going to be making plays out there. But for him to be able to throw to Josh and we saw Kobe out there a little bit, but Josh, the plays that he's making with really no other threat on the other side is just pretty remarkable in its own right because he goes out there again, has 8 catches, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, and every week he makes a routine circus catch. Everyone across the country sees it as a circus catch, but we see it as pretty normal nowadays.
He's such a skilled pass catcher. I mean, he catches the ball at the highest point. He knows how to use his body to block out defenders. And he runs precise routes. He's got amazing hands. He's one of those receivers that you really like to watch. I mean, as an ex-receiver, I don't know, man. Just watching him run routes and the way he plays the game, I love it. I think right now you have to look at him as the leader for the Biletnikoff Award as the top receiver in the country. And there's buzz is starting to kind of, you're starting to hear more Josh Doctson in the national media, and you even seen him on some Heisman lists in the top 10, top 7.
I'm starting to wonder if he's going to take some votes away from Trevon for Heisman.
And honestly, right now, I think if you vote, I think Leonard Fournette's the guy. I think he's going to win the thing if the voting was today. But we still got 6 games, and anything can happen in those 6 games. TCU really needs for somebody that's playing LSU to stop the guy. But the way Boykin's rolling, he's going to end up with 4,400 yards passing, 600 or 700 yards rushing, and over 50 touchdowns. So his numbers will be there.
Let's talk about the Heisman for a second, though, because the Heisman's given to the best player in college football. And obviously, we've all seen Leonard Fournette and know he's a remarkable running back. If you take Leonard Fournette off LSU's roster, how much do they decline? Do they lose every game? Do they finish out the season winning only 8 games? Because I think the argument is if you took Trevon Boykin away from TCU's offense, took him away from the team right now, TCU's not going to be undefeated. Period.
No,
he does more. He does more for his team than any other candidate out there.
I would say LSU would have 2 or 3 losses right now, though. Honestly, without Fournette. You look at the games that they've won, and they've been really close games, and it's taken 200-plus yards and 3 touchdowns by Fournette just to get them there because they don't have a passing game right now, and they don't have another running back on the roster that's producing like that. So, I mean, obviously it's LSU, and they're 3 deep at every position of All-American caliber players, but he is an unreal force.
Well, if Trey's not invited to New York this year, it's going to be a travesty.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way he doesn't get. It was a travesty last year. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's any way he doesn't get invited this year. And I think you're looking at either the next Heisman Trophy winner here in Fort Worth or second place at worst.
Yeah. Let's talk about some negatives in this game because
Okay.
there's plenty of negatives. But I'm going to start off with the officiating. That crew, I don't know if Coach P had ticked them off in the past because it's the same crew that was at Texas Tech in 2013. Anyway, I was told today that they were 0-3 with that officiating crew. And they were horrible. Both sides of the ball, they were horrible. Both teams. The Joe Huebner pass in the fourth quarter, which, by the way, they did score a touchdown on when he was 4 yards past the line of scrimmage and threw the forward pass, that's unacceptable. I mean, for that play not even to be reviewed is unacceptable.
I don't even know what to say about the officiating. You don't want to be the guy that's sitting there. Oh, it's the officials. Man. I'm telling you what, this is the worst officiating I've ever seen, and it's becoming an epidemic in the Big 12. And I know it was this one crew is very well known for their mind-boggling mistakes, but I'm seeing it in other games too. The lack of holding call. Obviously, if you watch enough football, you know you could call holding on every single play, but there are the blatant holding calls where a guy is spun around backwards and his jersey's about ripped off.
That happened to Montreal. The play before Derek intercepted.
Sprung Huebner for a long run. And then to be able to go 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and not get called for an illegal forward pass, it just blows my mind. These guys are getting paid a lot of money to make these calls, and maybe they're getting caught up. Maybe there's a lot of inexperience. I don't know what the excuse is. Maybe the new high-paced, fast-paced Big 12 offenses, these guys can't keep up. I don't know. But the Big 12 has to do something. These guys are on a payroll, and they're an embarrassment right now.
There was definitely some home cooking on a couple of those calls, and it was like I was watching the NBA for a second when you get a fast break and the ref kind of gets the fans behind him on an and one, and sometimes the player doesn't even touch the player, but somehow he gets the whistle anyway. And it was kind of how it was. You know, Kansas State was driving in the game, and they throw a deep pass down sideline because it became obvious that Kansas State was going to throw deep because they knew either it was going to be a play that somehow they caught, which they did one or two times with Klein, but they knew more than anything the refs were going to throw a flag because TCU was not turning them around. They were getting flags thrown on them. O'Malley had 3 by himself. But the big thing is that pass interference on Denzel Johnson when he was basically mauled by the Kansas State receiver was just a complete shock to me.
I mean, we could go around and around ad nauseum about these pass interference calls. I'm not saying that Corey O'Malley wasn't interfering on some of those plays. He was.
He did get away with one late in the game.
Sure, and he did. And that's the other thing. He got away with the one that I thought was kind of obvious, but it's just a lot of inconsistency. And I'm not saying being an official is an easy job. I've never done it, and it looks very difficult. But if that's your profession, then I expect to see a little better results than what we're seeing right now. The fact that defensive backs even scared to get close to a receiver right now. I mean, here's another example. Josh Caraway had a for sure sack on Huebner. He flies through the line of scrimmage, hits him with his shoulder, and immediately throws his hands up in the air because he thought the ball had been thrown. He's so gun shy right now to get a roughing the passer call. The defense is having their teeth cut out. They're having their horns cut off. I don't know what you want to say. They can't be aggressive. And when you take away a defense's aggressiveness, you're taking away their ability to stop a good offense.
And the big thing when Meacham got the flag thrown on him, thankfully it got taken away, is because on the play like that, when they're going for 2, it's the referee's responsibility to go over and ask the coach, which hash do you want to go from? Do you want to go from the left or right? They never did that. So it was Gary's job, Coach P's job, to go out there and get the ref's attention, but he wasn't able to do it. So Meacham runs out there and gets the attention, and that's kind of what got the flag thrown, but it got picked up because obviously they were trying to get the attention because the refs never asked. And apparently, from what I was told, is that even when they told them which hash they wanted to line up at, they still went to the wrong hash and had to fix it again.
Right,
So
I saw that.
You know, like you said, we could talk about the refs for a long time, but the other negative I want to talk about, Corey O'Malley did struggle some. He got away with a couple pass interferences. Obviously, got called for 3 of them, and you want to see better. You want to see better defense from your secondary as they move forward and get ready to go on the road against teams like Oklahoma State. It's gonna, and even this week against Iowa State with Bundage, a big receiver like he is. I mean, they're going to throw it up to him, and Corey's going to have a big task because they know, the rest of the Big 12 knows Corey's very aggressive, and if they throw it to him high, throw it high enough, then Corey's probably going to get there a little bit early, as he has been in these previous games. So, I mean, that's one thing that's definitely got to be fixed is the pass interferences.
I think one thing you're seeing right now is definitely the lack of depth in the defensive backs really hurting TCU. The fact that you can't rotate in Mosley, the fact that you don't have Tejada. I mean, you need these kind of guys in a pass-happy league with big physical receivers. You need to bring in 3 or 4 guys, and they just don't have it right now. And you're asking a guy that's already has to have he's got to be a little gun-shy, O'Malley, that is. So you're asking him to get up there and be physical, but the guy's scared to death. He's going to get 5 more pass interference calls on him. So what do? Do you let a guy beat you deep, or do you maul him? I mean, I guess instead of giving up a touchdown, you give up a 15-yard penalty. You'll take that every time, but not if you're getting 4 or 5 a game.
Yeah,
so
that's just ridiculous.
He's going to have to improve. That's all there is to it. But, I think one thing we're going to learn later in this year and even going into next year is all these young guys are learning by trial by fire, so it's going to make them better players in the future.
Well, end of the day, win is a win is a win.
It's all.
I mean, that's
you got out of Manhattan, Kansas on a night game, conference game on the road, and you won. That's all that matters.
Now you get to go to Ames, where Iowa State's not having a really good year.
But they can still
For
score.
whatever reason, it's always tough to play in Ames, Iowa, especially at night. And I'll make the prediction right now. The game this week against TCU, it will be one of the 3 largest crowds ever in Iowa State history.
Oh, it's going to be a sellout, guaranteed. They're going to be amped up. It's going to be a night game. You got to understand these night games. You guys that tailgate, y'all know this. The more you drink, the more you drink, the louder you get. So TCU's walking into these hornets' nests every night on night games in Minnesota. Later game at Tech. You got the night game in Kansas State. Now you have one in Iowa State. These fans are liquored up and ready to go when the game starts. So TCU's not just playing the other team. They're really taking on these other teams. And so you want to see TCU's fans respond and give their team that same home field.
For all you Cowboy fans that love Brandon Weeden, I mean, I think that's where it kind of started for him to kind of his downfall. Because remember when he was quarterback in Oklahoma State, and I think they were ranked number 2 in the country, and they went up there, lost. Big time loss. So it's not.
Never even
it's
thought
not,
about that.
Well, I do believe he was the quarterback, wasn't he, when they were ranked number 2?
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Someone will correct me if I am, but I'm not a big Cowboy fan, but I do know he wasn't very good. But
Yeah.
Let's talk about Iowa State for a second. They do have a very good running back, freshman running back, 6 foot, 200 pounds, Mike Warren.
Yep.
I'm kind of nervous about that kid.
What did he have? 230 yards rushing last week, something like that.
It was against Texas Tech.
Yeah.
They're going to give up a. It's not saying much when you're gashing the Red Raiders because
That's
that
true.
happens on a routine basis. But you do got to have some concern with the way Texas was able to run the football. Really, the last 3 weeks, Texas Tech ran the ball well, Texas ran the ball well, and Kansas State ran the ball well. And they're kind of doing this against the bread and butter of Gary Patterson defenses. I mean, they're usually in the top 5 in run defense, and they've really been getting ate up when it comes to running the football. And actually, we talk about it a little bit too much, but the pass defense hasn't really been too bad. I mean, especially against Texas. I mean, against Texas Tech it was bad because you have a great quarterback in Mahomes throwing all over the place and good receivers, but against Texas they shut it down pretty well, and against Kansas State they shut it down pretty well, and it's really been the opposing team's run game that's kept them in ball games with TCU. But Iowa State did lose to Texas Tech last week, 66-31, and you knew Texas Tech was going to finally have a breakout against someone because they've had a pretty tough go with TCU and Baylor the first 2 conference games, but they still score points. Iowa State can score some points, and when you have Sam Richardson back there at quarterback, who I believe is in his 10th year as Iowa State's quarterback. You always got to be kind of cautious with his running ability because he's not the best of throwers, but he can scramble. And that's something TCU's definitely going to have to watch out for.
I think this year more than any year before, you just have to throw the stats out the window. It is hard to believe when you see these stats this is a Gary Patterson defense, but when you take into account everything that's gone into it, not to make excuses because Gary Patterson's not making excuses. He expects those guys to perform, but I mean, you see what they're playing with. You know, they're playing with one arm and one leg tied behind their back right now, and I think a peg leg on the other leg. So they're struggling, but they just have to make enough stops to, like Gary Patterson said, win by 1 point. He said that even against Iowa State, and I believe he honestly means it. You win every game on your schedule, but whether it's by 1 point or by 50, the rest of it will take care of itself. So
I will say it's probably going to be a different game than 55-3 from a year ago. Iowa State does have some good talent at the skill positions. Obviously, we talked about Sam Richardson and Mike Warren. Mike had almost 250 yards last week against Texas Tech.
He's averaging 8 yards a carry this year.
Yeah,
as a freshman.
8.8 to be exact. So when you have guys like Washington rushing for 188 on you, and then Coleman from Texas rushing for over 100 on you, and Joe Huebner rushing for over 100 on you, you got to be kind of wary of what Mike Warren's going to be able to do. But the thing that kind of concerns me is on the outside because they've got big outside receivers that aren't really vertical threats, but they're big guys that can block. Quentin Bundridge is a guy that I've always thought was a pretty good receiver in the Big 12. He's got great size. He had 75 yards last week against Texas Tech and a touchdown. And Alan Lazard is a guy that was really a highly touted recruit coming out of Iowa a couple years ago. He's just a sophomore.
6'5", 223 pounds.
Yeah.
He's already got 24 catches this year. Again, like Jeremy said, not really the deep threat, but these are big physical guys that can give you a trouble in goal line situations. They're going to be really difficult to cover, and they can move the chains just 10, 12 yards at a time.
Sam Richardson, he's not the throwing quarterback, though. I mean, he's not putting up good stats at all. I mean, last week against Texas Tech, he threw, 3 interceptions, something like that, and he's almost thrown as many interceptions. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but he's almost thrown as many interceptions as he has touchdowns.
He's got 8 touchdowns this year and 6 interceptions. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's he's not going to scare you throwing the ball, and he's not, honestly, he won't really scare you running the ball. He's got 38 carries for 29 yards this year, so I'm sure there's a lot of sacks involved with that. But
he is one of those guys that tries to run 50 yards back to avoid a rush instead of throwing it out of bounds.
Yes.
So there probably are some plays that, I'm exaggerating on that, but there are probably some plays where he's tried to scramble around and probably lost 10 to 15 yards on a couple of those plays where he should have just thrown out of bounds. But, I mean, you talk about a veteran, good grief. I mean, he has been there. I
he's a
joked around.
12th year senior, right?
Yeah, something crazy. I mean, I think the other Sam Richardson that was there as a cornerback, I think his kid's fixing to enroll at Iowa State now. So, I mean, Sam B. Richardson has been there a long time. But, the thing about this game is they have one of my favorite coaches, Paul Rhodes. And you don't know how much longer Coach Rhodes is going to last up there at Iowa State. You got to think that he's on a pretty hot seat. People love him up there. I mean, he is player's coach, so to speak, but you got to get more wins. And Iowa State, their 38-13 win against Kansas might be their best conference win of the year. Now, they can come out and shock TCU. Again, they're going to be playing in front of a big crowd this Saturday, and the way TCU's played on the road so far, you can't give a W in the win column yet. I mean, that's plain and simple. You cannot do that with this league right now because there's so much parity in college football, and you never know what's going to happen when these kids show up Saturday night because, as we said, crazy things happen in Ames, Iowa.
Well, it's a good atmosphere for college football. They're great fans. They're loud. They're very supportive of their team. I mean, think about this. This is a team they are a cellar dweller in the Big 12, but they still sell out.
No, hold on. Kansas has that position now.
Okay, but you've got Iowa State and Kansas neck and neck for the worst teams in the conference. Obviously, this year Iowa State's much better, but it seems like it's been, 10 years 8 years removed from bowl contention when they were in the Texas Bowl, and
Yeah.
I mean it's
I mean, they're only a few years removed from coming down to Fort Worth and beating the brakes
Yeah.
off of TCU.
well, yeah, and that was
And
Boykin's
Trevon's first start.
exactly, and he looked like a deer in the headlights in that game too. But that's a good atmosphere in Iowa for football. I mean, they love their football up there, and the fans are going to bring it. And TCU, they better not come out slow and sloppy because they'll find themselves down really quick.
Well, bad news because on Wednesday, Coach Patterson was saying they were practicing exactly how they were last week, just kind of taking the first hour of practice real lightly, and then before moving indoors is when they would actually, or when they did move indoors is when they would start practicing hard. But he did say that was a similar practice as they were having last week when they played Kansas State. And these are D1 kids. This isn't like you're playing FCS kids or, someone from Tarleton State. These are, some pretty good athletes that TCU can't go in there just thinking it's going to be an easy win. And the good thing is they don't have, at least I don't think they do. I mean, it's a senior-led team. But you got to be aware if Coach Patterson is saying that about the team, then something is going on.
And this will be probably the coolest weather that TCU's played in this year. Right now, they're calling for a high of 55 on Saturday. And game time, it's going to be in the 40s. So,
Hey, as long as there's not sleet and ice.
yeah,
I mean, that's,
no precipitation is expected. It's supposed to be a clear day, but you're looking at probably in the high to mid to high 40s at game time. So, but it's still not enough. As long as the wind is pretty calm, I don't see anything affecting TCU's passing attack. They're still going to pass the ball well, but wouldn't mind seeing them hand it off to Aaron Green 25 times either.
well, that was another thing from the Kansas State game. The only two players that carried the football were Boykin and Green. So you got to think that's going to change this week.
Yeah, where's Kyle Hicks? Where's Trevorris? I mean,
So they were over there rooting on the sidelines.
Yeah.
You better believe it. But I said this last week. If there's a time for TCU to go on the road out of state to Kansas and Iowa, I mean, now's the time to do it before you get weather playing a big part in the outcome of the game. So that was kind of what happened last year at Kansas. People were just freezing their tails off, and we were in the press box ourselves.
yeah.
But anyway, let's
What next?
we're gonna go around the Big 12.
Let's do
looks
it.
like. What game you want to talk about first? Want to talk about that game in Dallas?
Yeah, let's get
Again,
let's get it out of the way. I'm sorry. I don't get into a habit of pulling for one team or another, but I really wanted to see OU win that game for the sake of the conference. I thought for the strength of the conference, for the strength of upcoming matchups with Baylor and Oklahoma State, I wanted to see Oklahoma with a high ranking coming in, and Texas just came out and whooped them up and down the field. So
It was right from the start. Texas had more aggressiveness. I mean, it was 14-0. You could tell they wanted to play in that game. Obviously, some of the freshmen stepped up, and the defensive line for Texas just mauled Oklahoma's offensive line. And going into the season, that was a big question for the Sooners. How well is their offensive line going to play? And I think Texas did a great job exposing what everyone else in the conference is looking forward to now is a weak offensive line for OU.
you like to see a team answer the bell for their coach, and I think what it showed the way Texas played is that there are some knuckleheads on that team, but there's a core group of guys that care about Charlie Strong and they want to see him as the coach, and they answered the bell for him. And they came out and they played like their hair was on fire, and the defense did completely dominate OU's offensive line. OU's been able to get away with it this year, and maybe it was masked with Baker Mayfield's ability to scramble around a little bit, but I think they got exposed for how weak and inexperienced their offensive line really is. And so Oklahoma's got to go back to the drawing board because they've been exposed and people are going to be looking at that film. But Texas defensive line, you got to get hats off to those guys. They played lights out. So and that won them the game.
I will admit I was more surprised to see the way Texas scored 24 more than I was them holding Oklahoma to 17. I always thought Texas had a good chance to be good on defense. They've got the talent. I mean, they're extremely young. It's going to be scary to think what they're going to be like in a couple years
Yeah.
when all these kids
There's
are
no
juniors
doubt.
and seniors. Kind of like everyone was talking about TCU a couple years ago. Just wait till these kids get older.
Wait till this TCU group is older.
Yeah, I mean, especially on defense.
Yeah.
But I was more impressed with Texas's ability to go out and score against Oklahoma's defense. I mean, they didn't put up gaudy stats, but they did have 368 total yards, and Gerard, they only threw 12 passes in this game, and it gives me optimism looking forward to that road game up in Norman, because if you can run the football against Oklahoma, then you're going to have success, and that's exactly what Texas did. I mean, they went out there and rushed for over 300 yards. I mean, it was incredible. They threw for 55, rushed for over 3. I mean, you're talking about 313 rushing yards on a team that was supposed to be able to stop the run pretty well. And you got to have, if you're a TCU fan, you got to have optimism now, because I'll circle that game as a potential loss for TCU, because it's never easy to play in Norman. And the way the Sooners had come back against Tennessee, and they had a pretty impressive win against West Virginia a couple weeks ago. I was looking at that game as one of those games that I couldn't pick. You know, I could very easily see them losing, but now I feel a little bit more optimistic.
And I'm going to be the first one to say, not to get off topic here, but I was maybe I was a little wrong on West Virginia. I was really touting them quite a bit because of their physicality and their defense. Obviously, losing Carl Joseph killed them, but they played a team with a pulse, and you see what happens, and it doesn't get any easier for them this weekend too. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but man, I think OU got exposed in that game, and we'll see what happens when TCU goes to Norman. What's next on the?
How about Baylor? We could talk about this for a couple seconds. Baylor went up to Lawrence and did what everyone expected them to do. They won 66-7 against a hapless Kansas team.
They could have scored 120 if they wanted to.
It was 52-0 at halftime.
And I really think they kind of let off the gas a little bit in the second quarter.
You think?
I mean, that was it's just embarrassing. Kansas sinks to a new low every week. It feels like, but I think at this point you just have to accept it for what it is. There's just not any talent on that team right now.
There's not. I mean, and Baylor has a ton of it. I mean, like you said, they let off the gas very early. They still managed 640-something yards, and they're rushing the ball at will against anyone. I don't care who it's against. When they're running the ball the way they are, it's a pretty scary thing.
When you're throwing for 300 and running for 300 every game, that is a nightmare for a defensive coordinator. And I know, TCU can say they look at it one game at a time, but they have to be already starting to try to figure out how they're going to stop that kind of an offense where you play action pass is going to be tough to cover, because that running game is going to be scary. And the second you try to put too many in the box and stop the run, they're going to eat you alive with the pass. So they got playmakers all over the field, and they put it on display against Kansas.
And their defense actually played pretty well this game. They only gave up 227 total yards. Again, that's against Kansas, so you don't know exactly how good Baylor's defense is. I mean, they'll get a better test this week against West Virginia. Baylor's going to have it out for them since that was their only loss last year. But let's go to another game. What do you want to talk about next?
Let's see. What is on the docket? Bear with me. I'm trying to think of who else played. Oklahoma State, West Virginia. That was another one that surprised me a little bit. Oklahoma State goes into Morgantown and wins that game. And I can't make up my mind what I think about Oklahoma State. I think they're not that solid. They turn around and prove me wrong. They're undefeated. They go on the road and they win in Morgantown. So maybe it's time to give Oklahoma State some love. I mean, they got some impressive physical defensive ends. They've got probably the most impressive defensive end combo in the Big 12, and their offense is starting to click. And I don't think they're not going to score 50 points a game every game, but they do enough on offense to scare you, and they're physical on defense. So they got a good squad, and that's going to be another really tough road game for TCU. I mean, all the tough road games are still coming up. So.
They did give up a 17-2 lead at halftime, though.
They did.
That game went into overtime. West Virginia, like you said a while ago, Carl Joseph losing that guy, that would be essentially like TCU losing Derek Kindred right now. You're talking about a leader and arguably the hardest hitter in the Big 12. Anytime you lose a guy like that on your defense, you're gonna struggle. But Oklahoma State, you got to give them credit where credit's due. They somehow keep finding a way to win. It's kind of like Florida State was last year. They're undefeated, but they keep squeaking out these games, kind of like TCU is this year. I mean, it's just win by 1 point mentality, and that could be a very interesting game. And it's good for the conference for Oklahoma State to be doing well right now, because you want to have another, if TCU or Baylor goes on to finish the season undefeated, which I do believe one of them will finish undefeated, you want to have an Oklahoma State have a good season. You want to have Texas Tech, Oklahoma. You want to have those teams represent your conference well, and I think Oklahoma State's doing it right now. They got good defense. Offense is kind of suspect. That's going to be a tough game for the Frogs in Stillwater in a few weeks, because it's always tough to play up there, and they're 0-2 up there in Stillwater since joining the Big 12. So Mason Rudolph didn't have a very good day throwing the ball, threw three interceptions, and J.W. Walsh is kind of their wildcat quarterback.
Kind of bring him in for a change of pace, yeah. He's still very athletic. I mean, either one of those guys can move the offense, and they do it in different ways. But Oklahoma State's going to be tough. Hey, let's look at, unless you got anything else on that game. Let's look ahead at next week's games in the Big 12. The big one for me, Oklahoma and Kansas State. That's going to be. That'll tell you exactly where Oklahoma is if they go in there.
Where's this game at?
I believe it's in Kansas State. Yes, sir. And so that's in Manhattan. It's a 3:30 Eastern kick, so 2:30 our time. That'll tell you where Oklahoma is. If they go in there and get beat by Kansas State, that's.
You do have two teams coming off losses, or coming away with losses last week, and Kansas State was an emotional loss.
It is.
You got to see how they bounce back.
That's going to be a desperation game. Both of those teams know they can't afford to lose many more Big 12 conference games if they have any aspirations of winning the Big 12. Obviously, Kansas State's already in a pretty bad hole at 0-2.
So who do you have in this game?
That's tough.
Just straight up. I know you're looking at those little figures, the numbers beside it for the spread.
I am. I'm going to go with Kansas State at home. I just, after witnessing that at home, and obviously they were really up for TCU and it was a night game, but man, that home field advantage is scary. And so I think they give Oklahoma more than they can handle, and they're going to pull it out.
I disagree with you. I think they're emotionally spent from last week. They're not going to have the same kind of environment as the number 2 team in the country being inside the stadium would bring you. Oklahoma State's going to bounce back. They're going to win this on the road, and people are going to start to question whether or not, or just how good TCU really is. I think Oklahoma wins this one by at least a 10-point margin.
All right. Well, maybe we should start keeping track of these things, because we haven't been keeping up with our records. I know you're beating me, and then you've gotten me every week. So
I've got you by 2 games.
2 games. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was close.
Yeah, I've got you by 2. I can't remember. I don't.
All right.
Too much stuff in between.
West Virginia at Baylor.
Give me the Baylor. I mean, West Virginia is down. I mean, it will be nice to see Baylor get a quality win. I do think the Texas Tech win at the end of the year is going to be a good quality win for them. I don't think West Virginia has enough horses in the stable to keep up with Baylor. Obviously, they play a little bit better on offense than the other teams. Obviously, Texas Tech was pretty good against Baylor, but I just think Baylor's offense is too much for West Virginia right now. I can see this game being a 52-24 type game for Baylor.
Yeah, Baylor's a 21.5-point favorite at home, and I really do. Like you, I don't see any way that West Virginia's going to be able to keep up. I like Skyler Howard. I think he's got a little bit of game to him. He's very inconsistent, though.
Yeah.
And you can't afford to not score touchdowns when you're playing Baylor. So Baylor's going to put points on the board. You better be able to match that, and I just don't think West Virginia can do that. Texas Tech at Kansas. This is going to be Kansas.
If there's a record for the most points scored in Lawrence in 2 consecutive weeks, it might be in jeopardy.
I think Texas puts up 70 on Kansas. They're 31-point favorites, and Kansas might actually put up 21 or so on Tech. So that might be Kansas might have their best offensive output of the year. Who knows?
I'm thinking Texas Tech's probably going to score in the neighborhood of 60 points again. I think they do take it easy. After they jump out to a big lead, I think it's going to be kind of get your foot off the gas, let your backups come in. I think Davis Webb will play a lot in this game. I think you'll see Texas Tech probably run the ball more in this game than you have all season. But Kansas, they don't have the horses right now to keep up with Texas Tech, just like Baylor and West Virginia. Going to be another tough, long day in Lawrence, Kansas.
How do you think David Beatty's enjoying his job so far?
Well, I think he likes the fact that he's a head coach, but it's going to take some time up there. Charlie Weiss left that place as just.
Does he feel guilty when he cashes his paycheck?
No.
I'm just being mean right now. I can't. It's got to be a terrible feeling. I mean, there's a helpless feeling. There's not, like you said, Weiss left that program in shambles. There's nothing that Beatty could do in year one. They're going to have to build. Exactly.
It's going to take recruiting his own players and getting the right personnel for his offense, for his defense. But it might be a 3-year process for them. And even in 3 years, they may still only be in the position to win 5 or 6 games.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when you have a coach before you that didn't give a rat's ass about his program and talk down about him. So
it's really sad to see that Charlie was allowed to stay around as long as he was, and the way he ran his own team down and just didn't even try to recruit, and he really was just sitting and taking a paycheck, and that's unfair to those kids, and it's unfair to that program and those fans. And Kansas has never been a juggernaut in football, but they've had good years. And
hey, they went to a BCS game.
They
once.
did. They went to the Orange Bowl.
Todd Reesing.
I mean, that was a good football team. But I just would like to see them get back to respectability, because it's embarrassing for them. It's embarrassing for the conference right now. So you'd like to see them get back on track. All right, last game in the Big 12, obviously, is your TCU Horned Frogs against Iowa State. What do you think?
I'm going to go Cyclones.
Going with the Cyclones.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with the Frogs. I'm gonna go with the score. I think I posted it on the board today. I think I went with 52-38. I think the Frogs will do enough scoring. There's really not a defense that I see in the country right now that can shut down TCU's offense. Kansas State did a pretty good job of it midway through the second quarter, but Iowa State is not as fundamentally sound as Kansas State is on either side of the ball, and so I could see TCU getting plenty of touchdowns. I think Boykin has another big day. He had a big game up there in Ames a couple years ago. Right now, he's playing with a lot of momentum, and I think the defense will again take its lumps, because Iowa State does have a pulse on offense. They can tie their shoes. They can score some points. So I do think TCU is going to win, but I think it's going to be one of those wins that everyone is. It's going to get to that point every week where you're not really going to care about the score. I don't know how much style points are going to matter as long as you stay undefeated, and that's kind of the point I'm at right now. I don't care about style points. I care more about the W's more than anything.
It's a 20.5-point spread, and I actually think TCU's defense plays much better this week. I think they are going to get tested this week in practice. Patterson's going to challenge them, that they know they've got a 12-day break coming up and before they play West Virginia on a Thursday night. I actually picked TCU 55-24 in this game. I was so far off last week, I almost didn't make a score prediction. I predicted 44-19 last week.
We were all far off.
I just still can't believe K-State scored 45. But anyway,
no one can.
55-24 is my pick, and I think TCU really that'll be their sixth game. I think it'll be their sixth game in a row with 50 or more points, which is just unreal what they're doing on offense right now.
Lots to look forward to Saturday.
Yeah, there's a good lineup of football Saturday. Not just in the Big 12, but I mean across the country. It's gonna be fun. I'll have my DVR running overtime. I usually record about 3 to 5 good games a week, and I go back and watch them just to see what's out there in the college football world. But I mean, you've got UCLA, Stanford.
I'm intrigued with Bama and A&M.
Yeah.
Intrigued by that game for sure.
I'm intrigued by Memphis and Ole Miss. I think Fuente's got a chance they're hosting Ole Miss in Memphis, and there's a chance there. That'd be a fun one to watch. But there's gonna be some really good games. Alabama, A&M, Michigan State. There's gonna be some good games this week. USC, Notre Dame. You got Florida, LSU. So a lot of good contests this weekend, and
the biggest game on
the
biggest game on my schedule for Saturday. The 7U Azle Hornets versus the 7U Aledo Bearcats.
Yes, sir.
Over here at Aledo. But speaking of young kids, not too young kids, let's talk about recruiting for a second.
Let's do it.
16 class, 16 commitments. Tell me the guys who TCU lands right now. Tell me. You got 30 seconds.
Who like out the remaining?
He's stumbling here, folks.
I want to know. Do you want the remaining people?
I want the positions. All right, let's break it down.
I think they get Denzel Okafor. I'm kind of doing a U-turn on that one right now.
I'm not yet.
Okay.
I still think, for some reason, I just feel that you don't want to think a kid's basing his decision off one game. But I think the Texas game, beating Oklahoma, will help Texas. Not just because they won, but just because he sees the program moving in the right direction, and he sees the way those players
responded for Charlie Strong.
Making Charlie Strong body surf across the field the other day. I mean, obviously, it's very apparent that those players like Charlie Strong, and I think with that win, you see Charlie Strong stick around for another year. But there's going to be some wild cards in the mix as signing day gets closer. Finishing out the class, I keep going back to a number, and that number's 23. I think for some reason they're going to sign between 20 and 25, and I just put the number at 23. No rhyme or reason. I always feel that it's going to be around that number.
I know you guys, a lot of y'all like to count the scholarships and try to figure out exactly how many there's going to be. It is such a fluid situation. It changes.
Fluid.
There's no way to really know. So the best case scenario is you're looking at 22 to 25. I would say 23 is probably a really good number. I think another guy that I think you're going to see end up committing to TCU is Isaiah Graham, the receiver out of Bastrop.
And that is a guy I know a lot of people have asked the question if TCU would take his commitment, and the answer to that is 100% yes.
Yeah. Hey, that kid, that is a very smooth. He's not the biggest. He's 6'1". He's athletic, but he is very smooth and he has great hands. He would be a huge weapon in this offense.
Yeah, you talk about a guy that can move pretty well. He's not Kobe Listenby fast, but he's quick, great hands. He's kind of like a bigger version of Josh Boyce, bigger version of a guy like Jerison Stewart that they got last year. But Graham could definitely make some plays. It's a guy that they've been recruiting for quite a while. They would definitely love to have him. And he's deciding on the 30th. TCU obviously is in great position. He made his official visit when they played Texas, had a great time, and I think TCU is in a very good position for him. The position that I think they're really wanting to focus on right now is offensive line and safety. They need tackles, and we mentioned Denzel. Denzel would probably be more of an inside guy, but as we talked about last week, they're kind of opening up their recruitment with Kellen Deesh again out of Byron Nelson. He was in for the spring game. I know that they're actively recruiting him right now. He's a tough kid to read. Doesn't really do interviews a whole lot. Back in the day, it was Baylor and A&M was two teams that were other than Arkansas that were among his favorites. But you got to think with Coach Looper on the job that TCU has a legitimate chance to get a kid like him.
Eric Cuffey named a top 5. TCU was in that top 5, but I think you and I both feel like he's either A&M bound or somewhere else in the SEC. I'm not even sure, where TCU is recruiting him right now.
Well, I found out today that it's kind of like the Cameron Williams situation. They're not real active in recruiting him, and I don't know the reason for that. I don't. Eric's got good grades from everything that I've heard, and there's some people that I've talked to out there that think that he's already silently committed to another program, and I can promise you right now, it's what they know is what Eric tells them, that he's already told the coaches where he's going. I know it's not TCU. He hasn't told TCU anything, so that. It was kind of shock to me to see TCU in his top 5, because if you're not really actively, what I was told today, it was like they're not putting on full pressure on them. In other words, you're usually with those type of recruits, you don't recruit mildly. You recruit full force. And from what I understand, he wasn't one of those kids that's getting recruited full force. I will say another corner that they are recruiting full force is Parrish Cobb, currently committed to Oklahoma. They love that kid. They love that kid.
He is a very smooth operator in the secondary. He was one of the more impressive kids at the camp. There's also a kid that's committed to another Big 12 school that I really liked at camp was Chris Miller, who's committed to Baylor.
Yeah.
I know TCU still obviously actively recruiting
They're looking
him,
for safeties.
and he would fit the bill of what you want in an athletic safety. He's a big hitter. He's got a lot of speed, and he's very physical at the point of attack. So that would be another guy to keep an eye on. He says he's solid to Baylor right now, but
And I think he is. He's kind of one of those guys you kind of take for their word, but if they start going out to visit, then you kind of got to raise an eyebrow a little bit and think, well, maybe he's not as solid.
who else you want to talk about? What about Jared Maiden? It's been talked about that his commitment to Oregon may be a little shaky right now. Where do you think the Frogs stand with him right now? Are they still even actively on him?
Yeah, they're on Jared for sure, and he was actually supposed to be on an unofficial visit for the Texas game. He didn't make it, but his little brother Jalen did, and I'm not sure if he made it over to the Baylor Texas Tech game at all. But you got to, he's still committed to Oregon, but you got to feel pretty good about TCU's chances because TCU was kind of always in it. And even a long time ago, when he had named a top three with TCU and Alabama, and I can't remember the other, was Ohio State.
It was Ohio State and Oregon, wasn't it? TCU,
Yeah,
Ohio State and Oregon.
and so you got to think that they would have a legitimate chance. And I think it is one of those situations where I bet they are able to get him in for an official visit late in the process, just to treat him well. Official visits are a lot different than unofficial visits, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're able to get him over there. I do think that there's going to be a ton of recruits at the Baylor game, and I could see a player with his caliber being one of those guys in the stands for that game.
And he's one of those kids that's 6'1" at 190. He's a big physical corner, but you could also see him even transition into a safety. He's got the ability to play both positions. He's just a big defensive back that you like to get, and when you can fill up your defensive backfield with those types of players, it really helps you against the bigger physical receivers in the Big 12.
Deontay Anderson's another guy that TCU's still actively recruiting. Big time safety out of Manville. He's got he pretty much name his school. He can go pretty much wherever he wants. I do feel TCU's going to get an official visit from him later in this process. Another guy that just visited recently that's on the offensive side of the ball and a guy that they really want is Kyle Porter. Kyle made it in for the Texas game, was on official visits with Brennan and Isaiah Graham. And, anytime you bring in your bell cow of the class and bring another kid that you really want, that just tells you right there how much they want Kyle Porter and Isaiah Graham when they have a guy like Brennan Wooten who basically should be on the coaching staff when it comes to recruiting. The kid recruits everyone out there. And, even though Kyle's been tough to reach, I talked to Brennan about it, and Brennan feels pretty good about chances. And, you don't know how much you want to take into what a 17-year-old tells you, but it is pretty positive when a recruit's telling a fellow recruit how much he loves the program. And obviously Kyle had a great time according to what he's been telling TCU and other recruits. He had a great time on his visit, so that's got to bode well for them. And even though they have Travion Williams committed, Travion's more of the Kyle Hicks type. They need a Travaris Johnson type, and Kyle Porter's that guy. And Kyle's more like Aaron Green. The way Aaron is, a little bit bigger kid. Kyle is about 200 pounds, and just a great running back, and he's been putting up huge numbers this year.
I want to ask you about a couple of guys on the defensive line. Obviously, you already got quite a few defensive end commits, but what about the duo out of New Orleans, Sky Martin and Stephen Taylor? I mean, is that a type deal where they're going to go somewhere together, or are they willing to split up, or is TCU active recruiting both of them? I know they like Sky, but
they're recruiting both of them. I'm not sure if they've offered Stephon Taylor. I wouldn't see any reason why they hadn't have offered them or offered Taylor. Sky's a very good player. Obviously, Oklahoma visit made a big impact on him last week. I don't know how much that affects his interest in TCU. I know before the interest in TCU was sky high. I mean, I can't I can't elaborate enough how sky high it was.
Yeah.
But it's one of those situations where it's a need at both positions. Sky would obviously feel a need at defensive end, and Stephon would feel a need at defensive tackle. But again, with Isaiah Chambers, you have a guy that can play outside and play inside. I don't know how many more defensive linemen they're going to take. I do know the big need right now is offensive line and safety. I mean, you're losing safeties left and right now, and you've got to find some replacements.
I think obviously those are your big needs right now is going to be safety and offensive line. But if a big defensive tackle like a Marcel Southall or Ed Oliver or Jordan Elliott want to commit, you take one of those guys, correct?
Yeah, I think they would definitely take Southall. I mean, he's a guy that had a pretty good summer camp, ran well, ideal in TCU's 4.25. He's not the biggest guy. He's kind of built like Chris Bradley a little bit, about that same size, same kind of quickness. I think he would do well in the TCU defense. But I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but I went out to see Gary Overshone a couple weeks ago, and he's hobbled a little bit. It looks like he has some type of leg injury, but you talk about a kid that just looks the part of a D1 defensive end.
We've got him listed at 217. What would you say he weighs right now? Think
He's
230?
way more than 217. I mean, I would say he's up in the 230 to 240 range. He just looks like the kid. When you walk up to a high school football game and you're trying to find the kid that you're supposed to come out and watch, it takes you about 2 seconds to figure out he's the kid that you need to come watch. Big, 6'5", 6'6", probably, like I said, 230, 240. Didn't get to see him at full speed, but I did see him over the summer, 4.53, and just looking at his shape right now, I mean, he could probably come onto the field for TCU right now and look like one of the more athletic defensive ends on the team, and that's saying something. But I was excited with Gary Overshone, and probably the guy that stole the show for me that night was Chris Robinson. Man, Oklahoma got a good one. I mean, Oklahoma did get a good quarterback, and it's just crazy how things worked out because that kid was so close to committing to TCU before Sean Robinson did. And I'll admit it, Chris right now, to me, has had a much better season than Sean Robinson has. But, still a long way to go before either one of those kids get to campus at TCU in Oklahoma. But that's about it tonight, man. I think we've talked about a ton of stuff. I think we went over our 1 hour mark.
Sorry to drag it on so long, guys. I know you guys like to get some recruiting nuggets when possible, and TCU's been sitting on a large class for so long, and there's not a lot of new names popping up right now. But as we know, following TCU recruiting, there's going to be a name pop up. Maybe it's going to be a flip from a Big 12 rival or from a Pac-12 team, or there's going to be a surprise commit that none of us saw coming. So just stay tuned with us. Keep us on here.
For all you guys that like to change things up, Jeremiah just did say that there's going to be a surprise commit.
Yeah, hold my feet to the fire because it happens every year. There's always one that you're like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. So, and I think it's going to end up being a pretty big name. So I'm going to throw that out there.
All right. Well, there you go. Well, guys, as always, we appreciate you guys listening to us ramble on. It's going to be exciting Saturday. Frogs get a chance to move to 7-0 on the season on the road at Iowa State. Should be a fun game to watch. Should be a fun week to watch college football. But until next time, I'm Jeremy Clark for Jeremiah Glenn. You guys have a great week.
Have a great day. Thanks.